You surely have learnt about the DNA replication, haven't you? Then you must also know how and when variations take place in an organism's body. As theory goes, whenever there is a slight glitch in the DNA replication process, it may lead to new varieties which are formed accidentally. This implies that all biochemical reactions are not accurate. And these very variations create new varieties of individuals in an already existing population. Let us look at an example to get a clear view about this idea. When frogs reproduce, there are times when a frog with an unusual body color is born. Here, let us assume the frog born is covered with yellow skin. The other frogs are all green in color. As time passes by, the yellow frog too finds favorable conditions for breeding more yellow frogs. In due course of time, there are equal number of both yellow and green frogs. One fine day, the place where these frogs reside is invaded by eagles, and they eat up most of the yellow frogs as they're quite visible among the green foliage. During autumn, exactly the reverse takes place. Now it is the turn of the green frogs to be eaten up as the camouflage won't work during autumn. Depending on the ones being preyed upon, the frog population of either the green or the yellow frogs is on the increase. Well, this is the survival mechanism of the frogs. This process, as we know quite well, is known as natural selection. But wasn't the yellow frog a rare variation? Well, yes it was, but later as situations became favorable, the frequency of transferring the yellow genes increased. Thus the number of yellow frogs increased drastically. But the numbers increased in autumn due to the need for survival. The chances of a yellow frog being spotted were quite less as compared to the green frog. A yellow frog would survive while a green one would be eaten up. Now let us look at another situation. Imagine that the green frogs live in a pond while the yellow frogs have their own separate pond. Unfortunately, some pollutant has been released in the pond of the yellow frog. What was the result? Well, the population of the yellow frogs came down in no time, even in the season of autumn. Very few yellow frogs survived, while the green frogs now became a majority. Now who do you think will be more in numbers? Of course, the green frogs. The yellow frogs were nearly wiped out. Therefore, the offspring of the green frogs would increase in number as compared to the yellow frogs. This is a case of accidental survival. Accidental survival? Let me explain this in a little more detail. The number of green frogs surviving in autumn is more than the yellow frogs. Obviously, nature would provide protection to the yellow frogs and not the green during its autumnal period. But a man-made accident killed almost all of the yellow frogs and thus the green ones outdid them. So that was a case of accidental survival. Do you want to know a third type of change which can take place in the frog population? Let us assume the frogs do not find anything to eat. The place where they live is parched and there is very little food available. The frogs become very small in size and almost all frogs do not grow beyond this size. What about the offspring of this generation of frogs? Well, they too eat less and will therefore be of small sizes. In the course of time, what if nature replenishes itself and now there is a lot more food to eat for the frogs? All the frogs will then regain their original size. In this case, being small or big in size wasn't dependent on the genes. It all depended on the amount of food the frogs ate. More food would lead in bigger sized frogs, while less food would mean tiny frog bodies. We now come to an important question. Look at the green or yellow skin of the frogs and the size of the frogs' bodies. Now tell me, which characteristic or trait is an inherited trait? What do we mean by inherited? It is a trait passed on from the parents to the offspring. Correct. The green or yellow skin is an inherited trait of the frogs. Is the size of the frog's body an inherited trait? Was it passed on from one generation to the next? Of course not. Each frog is born of the same size, but its growth corresponds to the amount of food available for its nourishment. For example, if a dog has its fur shaved or trimmed, does it mean that its offspring will have little or no fur at all? Or if a person has lost his arm, will his offspring lack an arm? As you know, these things are physical modifications and they do not alter or affect the genes. What are such traits then called? We call them acquired traits. Traits that affect the genes, modify them, and are passed on to their offspring are called inherited traits. Traits which cannot be passed on from one generation to the next but affect only the physical body of an individual are called the acquired traits. In our next video, let us look at how inherited traits can lead to the formation of new species.